This is your urgent call to action. We are all called to lead in a world in chaos, crisis, and turmoil. Join a pivotal global movement for change to transform the leadership crisis worldwide. Will you play it safe, or will you wake up, step up, and speak out? Like Nelson Mandela did for South Africa and the world, we need a radical new way to think, act, and lead, leading boldly into the future. Join host Anne Pratt, a Harvard Fellow and multi-awarded businesswoman, and unlock the best version of yourself to revolutionize leadership with what the world needs now.
Greetings to all you future bold leaders. Thank you for joining us from around the world. My name is Anne Pratt. I'm formerly from South Africa, and I relocated abroad to attend a Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative Fellowship in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States of America. Our thoughtful bold leader today joins us from the southern tip of Africa, in the city of gold, Johannesburg, South Africa. She's a director of companies, a non-executive director of multiple Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed boards, including Discovery, Bidvest, and the JSE Limited. She served as a senior corporate executive in financial services, focused primarily on private equity, corporate and investment banking, and impact investments. She is a champion of change for the economic and social empowerment and upliftment of women across South Africa and Africa, a founder and a former chief executive of the Women's Development Business Investment Holdings Group, which created broad-based investment opportunities for women, including rural women. In 2017, she won South Africa's Business Woman of the Year Award in the corporate category. She has published articles in leading publications like the Financial Mail, and she also has multiple degrees in finance and tax from leading universities in the United States and South Africa, including the Bentley Graduate School of Business, the University of Johannesburg, and Columbia Business School. Stay with us as she shares compelling insights around diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly in large corporations. What's possible when we raise our kids differently, a compelling corporate framework, and why corporations and institutions need top-down support, metrics, and economic incentives to drive transformation and results. We warmly welcome my dear friend, Faith Khanyile, and welcome to Leading Boldly into the Future. So Faith, thank you so much for coming to have this conversation. It's been a long time, my friend. I've really missed seeing you and talking to you, but I'm so pleased you're part of this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, Anne. I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Great. So, leading boldly into the future, tell me, what is your definition of leadership and what is your definition of boldness?
My definition of leadership, first is about leading self. It's about knowing who you are, because if you don't know who you are, how are you going to lead others? So for me, a good leader really, first of all, knows who they are, knows what are their core values, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and, what are their purpose as well, like what makes them tick, like why do they wake up in the morning? So for me, that's really what a leader is someone first that knows themselves, that are very confident of who they are. Yeah. And then with that, with their abilities and with their assets and liabilities, they then use, those, characters and attributes to impact others positively.
I'm with you.
So for me, a leader is someone who is passionate about impacting other people positively. Boldness is really about doing things that are difficult, doing things that, that you've got a lot of fear towards, doing things that are almost like impossible to do, but saying to yourself, I will, put my energy I will invest time. I will do whatever I can, to make something happen. It may look impossible to do, but, I will really just, put my all to make it happen. So for me, it's someone that, being bold is really going against the grain. It's also going against your own discomfort. And just doing what your heart desires, and also obviously, doing what is right for others.
You in your own life have exemplified that, on more than one occasion. I'm curious that you began with the definition of leadership that talks about knowing ourselves. You've come from a remarkable family. I'd love you to share with us a little about, in your early childhood, what really shaped you? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Those core values, knowing who you are, and being able to live with boldness and lead with boldness.
I was born in South Africa, in a province called KwaZulu-Natal, outside, in a small village actually called Kwabiela, outside Empangeni. I was a second born of 6 siblings, 3 boys and 3 girls. Mm-hmm. And basically I grew up in a family where it didn't matter whether you were a boy or a girl. Everyone did whatever chores at home, The boys will cook, the boys will clean the floors, and the girls will do the same. Yes. My parents also owned a shop, in the community, or like a general dealer shop in the community, where, they sold anything from milk and bread, personal care, everything. So for us, then when we were growing up, basically after school, we were expected to go and help out in the shop. Yeah. So I think for me, that early upbringing of one saying, it doesn't matter whether you're a boy or a girl, you have to all get involved in whatever needs to be done, But also secondly, just sort of like the working hard. So, so after school, we were never idle, We were always, in the shop, working, helping, engaging with the community, engaging with people, really also just getting to understand what's going on in people's lives. Because, when you're owning a shop or a business, you're not just selling goods and services. There's actually a relationship there. So I think those are, that's what I learned really earlier on in my childhood.
Yeah. That's pretty progressive for that time, that girls and boys in your family were raised to do exactly the same chores. I mean, do you think that has kind of shifted your mindset around, a very important issue of gender, not only gender inclusion, but just the whole issue of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? I mean, how has that navigated your path and your mindset? How's that shifted your mindset, and what do you think others need to do?
That has definitely shaped, my mindset, my look, my outlook, and also how I engage, with others, either in the workplace, socially, etc. And I mean, I'm quite involved, for example, in women development, in just impact investing, and just making sure that, we really are inclusive in the way we think and in the way we design our, institutions, processes, etc. Because I really believe that each and every person's has got their own greatness and unique attributes that they must be allowed to contribute in an environment that encourages that encourages, inclusivity. So, yes. I mean, I think if I look at, what my career has been over the past 25 years or so, and I think what I learned earlier on at home, and then obviously later on, through my education, I'm really applying now, those learnings, those principles in everything that I do, because they've really shaped, who I am. And that's really appreciating the uniqueness of each and every person.
Yeah.
and not closing doors just on people just because one is a man or one is a woman or one is sort of like, gender neutral, so to speak.
Yeah. And Faith, I don't know if you recall this conversation, but when you were head of corporate banking back in Standard Bank, one of the big listed banks in South Africa, a few years ago, I remember having a conversation with you around this whole issue of inclusion more broadly within South Africa's transformation and the importance of inclusion, but how many corporations would tick the boxes of diversity and inclusion and, tick the numbers. We have so many people on our boards or in our executive teams. I distinctly remember you saying that it's one thing to tick the boxes, but what do my fellow, bosses, colleagues really know about me, Faith the person, my husband Reggie, my children, and so in the context of that, of inclusion, what is inclusion in the workplace?
I think inclusion in the workplace and actually starts with a mindset. You know what I mean? Because if your mindset, does not embrace, different people, either, different people through gender, race, background, you're not really are then going to get to the nitty-gritties of what, inclusion is about. So for me, it starts with really, having leaders that have got the right mindset, that is open, that is forward thinking, that is really embracing of the differences. And then from there, once you've got that, the leadership with the right mindset, then it's really then about having the policies, that really promotes that. And also, obviously, the policies alone will not work if the environment is not conducive to really, promoting inclusion. So you need the policies, but also, you need, the environment that is really, inclusive. For example, an environment that provides, maternity benefits, for women, or also that actually allows women to have flexibility if women have had children and then, they need to go, to watch their kids playing soccer, so you need policies that are enabling and that promote, inclusion. And I think inclusion does not just happen. So, you have to have these ongoing, training programs, because also there's a lot of unconscious biases that actually lead to people excluding others without even realizing that they're actually excluding others, So you really need to have, these ongoing, intense, training programs, etc. And obviously, lastly, for me, you need to have measurements and targets because, inclusion, and there's one thing for us to say, okay, it's all about having an enabling environment. It's all about having leaders with the right mindset that are really embracing inclusion. But we must then have targets because unfortunately in this world, we still don't have sort of like a fair representation. So targets that are measurable, where people can be accountable, and where the board of companies or the board of directors of companies are also, asking the right questions, about, inclusion and diversity.
I think that's true. Do you have an example for us, Faith, where an organization was going through a difficult time in terms of trying to create this environment of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Is there a specific example? What was the challenge in that moment? And, what was the pivotal moment when the organization realized they needed to shift something?
I do have an example, and I'm still involved with that organization right now as a non-executive board member. So basically, the challenge was, you have this board of directors as well as the executive that is basically like 80% plus male and white. Okay.
And what sector? And can you just tell us what sector?
Financial services sector. This is in the financial services sector. It's a large company in South Africa, that is also listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And as I said, I'm a non-executive director on the board of this company. So when I joined the company, on the board, I think, so it's a large board as well. It's a board of about 15 or 16 people.
Yeah.
So the board had 2 women and one Black gentleman, and then the rest was white males. The executive committee was basically just 100%, white males.
Yeah.
So, so the process that, we had to go through as a board. So I served on the Social and Ethics Committee of the board. Basically, the Social and Ethics Committee's one of the key roles is to really drive this diversity, equity, and inclusion on the boards. And in South Africa, it is basically, it's a legislated committee. So, given obviously my interest in the area of inclusion and diversity, I said I want to serve on this committee. And then, then we started this process of really understanding why we have a board and an executive committee that is completely, not representative of, of South Africa. And we then went through that process of, obviously, first we needed to make sure that there was an alignment with the group CEO and the chair of the board to say, this is a problem that actually needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
So then we did that. Then once, we had the buy-in from the chair of the board and the CEO, then as the committee, then we went through the process of partnering then with the various, executives to really, find ways to transform, their teams, and also and obviously to understand why the teams were not diverse. And, the typical reasons that we were getting from these executives was that they can't find women or, Black people or the right women or Black people to appoint onto these roles.
That is so often the objection or the, alleged reason, which in some cases may be more challenging, but in other cases, it's just finding the right people in the right places.
But, and I mean, fast forward to now, because there has been really, a remarkable change actually in this particular company. The board right now, it's 35% Black and 25% women. It's still not where we want it to be, but at least now there are targets. The company has put in place stretch targets to say, okay, by 2025, it actually wants to be at least 35% women and 45% Black. So that's a big tick. And I think then if we look at the executive level, what has happened there, I think the change there has been slow, but there has been a diversity. I mean, if you look at the makeup of the ExCo now, it's at least, I think it's about 40% female, which is really, it's just amazing. And then you look at the senior management level, there, the female representation is even higher. So we are hoping that over time, these ladies moving up to the executive committee so that, the committee is really, more diverse. So that's basically an example of what we had to do. Partnership with the, with the leadership, really trying to help them also to think outside of the box in terms of, finding, the right talent to bring in to the business.
I was going to ask you that, Faith. So in terms of shifting the mindset of the current executive, what were the steps you went through where people just said, we can't find the right people? Can you just take us through what were the key steps that helped that executive shift the mindset and shift the numbers in terms, not only the numbers, but the quality of what they've done and these positive improvements in
I think the process so involved obviously partnering with the executives, obviously understanding currently, where are the opportunities also to bring, either women or, people of color. So that really, I think for me, it's critical that there is that partnership and collaboration, because you cannot force people to do anything.
Sure.
So once you've got that partnership, then, the executives then are going to say, then will come up, because usually the executives, they have like a talent pool, So they showed us the pool and we said, but guys, this pool is still not going to help you to solve your problem. Let us then connect you with people that, or recruitment agencies that actually are playing in this space that can help you. So we did that.
And are there incentives also built around creating greater impact from a diversity inclusion? I mean, their personal performance bonuses and incentives?
Critical, and so that was one of the key game changer as well, because sometimes, unfortunately, people's pockets must hurt before they can actually, shift the way they think and the way they do things. Yeah, definitely. That was one of the key recommendations to say.
No, that makes sense, Faith. I have to ask you, you alluded earlier to some of the legislative issues in terms of the Social and Ethics Committee at board level. Can you just pinpoint the key sort of legislation guidance for the Social and Ethics Committee?
Okay, so basically, the key is an Employment Equity Act.
Yeah.
So it's the Employment Equity Act, and then the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act.
Yeah.
So those are the sort of like critical legislations that really driving this agenda of change and transformation, inclusivity, Black, and this legislation, and they really are trying to address economic inclusivity from a number of levels. So from an ownership level of the companies to the management control structure, i.e. who is making decisions in this company. And then from the procurement perspective of these organizations, because again, what apartheid did in South Africa was that it completely marginalized the participation of Black people in the economy.
Yeah.
So, Black people really ended up just, being like spaza shop owners, and they were not really integrated into the mainstream economy. So the procurement aspect of the legislation then aims to address that, to have more Black people and women-owned businesses as well, procuring from, from these large companies. And then the other one is around enterprise and supplier development. This is really where, a business is expected to support a small and medium-sized businesses, because again, in South Africa, they are the largest employers and job creators. Yeah. But again, they're not necessarily linked tightly into the value chain of these large corporates. So those are sort of like, and then the last one is socioeconomic development element, which basically then that just speaks to, investing in communities where businesses are making money, and really making sure that, those communities are uplifted. Sorry, I missed the other one, the skills development, because that's a critical one, the training and development of people, and really making sure that they can participate effectively in the economy.
Yeah. No, that's really important. And to what extent, Faith, do you think these legislative changes have really helped organizations, corporations in South Africa make these big transformational steps? How important is the legislation?
I think the legislation has been really a catalyst to really getting South Africa to where it is today. And I mean, we're still a long way to go. But I mean, like if I look, for example, at the ownership element of the legislation, earlier on, in the 90s when the Black Economic Empowerment legislation was introduced, there was a lot of emphasis on ownership. And actually, you had a number of, Black and women-owned businesses that were started and as a result of that legislation. And I think for someone like myself, I think that I was fortunate to have been part of that through one of the organizations that I was associated with as a founding member, Women's Development Bank Investment Holdings, which is a women-owned and led company that basically is there to promote the meaningful participation of women in the economy. That company would not have been created was it not for this legislation. There are lots of other companies and that have been created to, Weephold, which is a women investment portfolio company, Tebe Investment Holdings, which has really gone to make a huge difference in the areas of education, for example, Kagiso Trust Investments.
Yeah.
So, and these are broad-based investment companies that are not just benefiting the few individuals, but also they aim to benefit communities. And of course, also you've had companies that have been formed that are benefiting individuals, which is also fine, you know what I mean? So as you can hear, and it's a mixed bag, how the legislation has done, but I think it has definitely went a long way to really, transforming the economy.
Yeah, and actually, as we know, in terms of women on boards, I mean, that is a global phenomenon.
Yes.
Countries around the world are still struggling with that transformation process. What struck me about your story, about your early childhood, Faith, about, I could just imagine your brothers, also cooking and doing things. How do your brothers feel about and having the role of woman at home, in the workplace? How do you think that has shaped your brothers and their mindset and outlook on life, on work, how they conduct themselves in the world?
I think my brothers definitely are very progressive brothers, if I may say so,
Yeah.
They're not, they don't have issues with who they are as men, because sometimes, unfortunately, men that have got problems with advancing women, they've got issues themselves. So, but anyway,
Sure.
So I think they're very progressive, they're embracive, they really respect women, and they respect the role that, women can and are playing in society. So, I really think, and, they also have got girl children, the brother that comes after me, and you can see how he has also raised his children.
Yeah.
The daughter went to Wits, has got honors in economics. The son is studying towards being a CA. But again, there were never any limitations, right?
Yes.
To say, boys this, or girls, maybe do, female-like professions. So, so I think their entire approach, mindset, demeanor is really for women, and they don't see women as threats, and they really just are very supportive of women advancement.
But Faith, that sort of brings to mind a question. I mean, not only is this important for how parents are raising children, but for those adults today that weren't raised in that way. What do you think organizations or other support structures need to do to help shift that mindset?
Before we even get to the organizations, and obviously it all starts at home, I really think that, parents must just start, freeing themselves from their own mental slavery, because this is really just what this is. So I think if parents can really just start freeing themselves and just see their children as who they are and not as a boy or a girl. So for me, that is really critical. And then I think the second thing then, if you look then at the wider, society, either, business, and schools, whatever, I think maybe starting with schools. And I think schools must really teach this issue of, for me, it's not just about equality, it's just about respect for others, respect for differences, and appreciation for the differences, that the different thinking ways, qualities that we each bring to the table. So fundamentally, and for me, it's about that. Like, we need to stop and actually start recognizing and appreciating other people. And I think the schools can play a huge role in that, in really shaping, the young minds, and really, changing the way they look at, at the world, the way they look and relate, to each other across gender, race, etc.
What for you were the key steps, and what part of you did you still hang on to? You spoke about your childhood, your upbringing, so it is starting again anew. How did you do that? But also, how do you still encapsulate parts of who you are, those very deep roots,
Yeah.
in terms of where you come from, and how do you integrate the two? I mean, the three separate questions.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
firstly, how did you start again? What were the steps?
I think the key steps were, one, I had to accept that I don't have a choice. I need to make this work. You know what I mean? So for me, that was like the first thing to say, okay, extremely difficult environment, but you actually don't have a choice because you can't go back home with nothing. You cannot give up and go back home with nothing.
Yeah.
So then once that mindset that I accepted it, okay, I have to stay here. Then, and I mean, for me, I think the second thing was to then say, okay, what do I need to succeed in this environment? So then I had to go through that process of saying, okay, obviously it's a process of saying, okay, so what am I not good at?
Yeah.
Where are those gaps and how do I close the gaps?
Yeah.
But also then who is going to help me to close those gaps? So it's about being open. I had to be open, to say, okay, actually, I don't know. I'm struggling. You know what I mean? I need help, And maybe that's also these days, then they talk about being vulnerable. But I guess at that point, I was just sort of like, a 19-year-old who was basically just doing. I don't think I was doing a lot of thinking, to be honest. So now you know what your gaps are and what you need to be addressing. How do you then do that? So, and I actually had a lot of for example, for me, I think academically there were gaps. So I had to take extra lessons.
Yeah.
Like with my English, I had to basically just work extra hard, to make sure that I was able to, to be at the level that, will actually ensure that I succeed. My maths was definitely not that great. So again, with maths, I worked so hard just to, to make sure that, I could, close the gaps, that I had. So that really working hard and having a support structure, around you, people that are encouraging you. And also, at least I could still call home once in a while, speak to my parents, so that support, helped. Yeah, just be like having this mental strength. And I think maybe the mental strength, I probably got that from my upbringing. And yeah, so for me, what did I bring? What did I bring along with in this newness of me? It's really that, it's the mental strength. It's also the faith. I was raised in a Christian home, so for me, the faith, the praying, the meditating, the asking the universe for help, definitely that's critical, very, very critical. And I think even today, it's part of my life and my journey. What else did I bring with? Yeah, I don't know. Just the survival instinct. I don't know.
Survival instinct. And what also struck me about when you say you had to, you didn't have a choice. I mean, in a way, you did have a choice. You could have not succeeded, but it was a choice to know that you really do want to succeed, that there are certain standards within and for yourself. Knowing you, Faith, I mean, what I know about you, that is very much built in around, there was a choice, but
true.
But it was really about your own personal standards.
True, you're right.
Yeah. That's fabulous. So shifting gears slightly, what in your mind are perhaps 2 or 3 of the biggest leadership challenges we face in the world today?
I actually think one of the biggest challenges is that we no longer have this typical leader that we all are looking up to. We don't have someone like a Mandela, for example, who was a selfless man who had to transform whatever egos that he had,
Yeah.
Forgive others, and really put the needs of each and every South African before his needs, So for me, I think that is the biggest challenge, that actually we don't have that. But for me, then the opportunity is that each and every one of us must step up and become a leader.
Well, you've kind of led me straight into, the next question. Many of us have had a number of Mandela moments, a moment when that really, stands out in terms of how Mandela shaped or inspired us or encouraged us to think and act and lead differently. What for you, Faith, has been a very important Mandela moment? What stands out as a key event that really struck you around the man, his life, his leadership?
I had the privilege of meeting Mandela, face to face, like you did. But I remember when he was released from prison, I was still in the United States, and I just remember.
That was February the 11th, 1990, right? Yes.
I just remember that grace, and like that confident grace, peace, and calmness. That's really what I remember about him. There was like no anger, he was just sort of like so at peace with who he was, That for me actually is the moment with Mandela that I remember.
And how has that shaped you, Faith, in how you conduct yourself? And what did you take away from that? How did you bring that into your own life or build on what you have in your own life?
Yeah. I think for me, first of all, Mandela did not get to where he got to in 1990 just by doing nothing. You know what I mean? He actually had to do a lot of self-work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Reflection, also, yeah. So I think for me, and I think that's really what I've sort of like taken to say, if you want to be a different person, if you want to transform yourself, if you want to achieve whatever goals that you want to achieve, you're gonna have to work on yourself every day.
Yeah.
Because if by doing that, you ultimately reach that level where nothing can shake you. You understand? You're so calm and confident that nothing really will shake you, because you know who you are, and you know what drives you. And so for me, I think that is sort of like something that I continue to work on.
What do you do daily, Faith, to make you unshakable? You are a very calm person. I mean, I've always thought that about you.
Yeah, and yes, but I also have my moments. So let's just make that clear. I'm not like a perfect calm.
No. I'm not suggesting that. But I've always known you to be a pretty centered, calm person. What are the daily rituals that help?
Daily rituals.
Yeah.
Daily rituals. Wake up in the morning, breathe, and actually just take that moment to appreciate that I'm awake. My soul is still connected to my body. I'm still have got, all the things, the blessings that I have, the nature. I actually just take a moment to do that, just to breathe and appreciate. And then from there, I will go downstairs. I love my good coffee. Okay, wait. Obviously, after brushing my teeth and all that.
Yeah.
Grab my coffee and, and then maybe do some additional meditation. And then from there, I would either go for a walk or a run. If it's not winter, because I don't like, I don't like
cold
waking
weather.
up early. I don't like cold weather.
Yeah, we know.
And then before COVID ends, then come back home, take a shower, and go to the office. But now it's basically yeah, working from home. So that is the ritual that I just try to, to stick to.
Mm. And you find that that helps you with a calmness, a
It
centeredness.
really does.
It
It
does.
really does.
Mm.
Yeah, especially also just for me, it's sort of like I want my life to be rounded, so it's like this mind, body, spirit, I'm really trying to do that because that's really what brings me calm, especially when I'm faced with challenges, frustrations,
Yeah.
difficult situations,
Yeah.
That's how I've been trying to live my life.
So, what do you think, in terms of Mandela's leadership, do you think it's still relevant for the world today? And if so, how and why?
It is definitely still relevant for the world today. Why? I just think that, there is so much, suffering, there is so much chaos. And who is causing the chaos? It's us, right? We humans, are causing the chaos. And why are we causing the chaos? I think we're causing the chaos because we don't appreciate the interconnectedness that we have as human beings. And also, I think we don't appreciate other people's lives. You see so many, killings, whatever. And I think it's just that lack of really just appreciating, sort of like the life of others. And I think Mandela, for me, like when he came out, I think he really, for me, understood that importance of another human being. Like, he was very big on human dignity, for example, right? So I just think that we need to really just start by like saying, appreciating others and appreciating, others' lives, and not just learning from someone like Mandela. Because I think if we can do that, and we can really start to shift the energy, because the energy right now is so bad. It's like it's just like, because we're not stopping and actually saying, if I do this, if I hurt Anne, I'm actually indirectly and directly hurting Faith. We're not thinking like that we're so interconnected.
So you're saying from Mandela, learning those principles of how to go through our own transformation, but also how to embrace our interconnectedness and dignity and respect for the rest of humanity and all of humanity.
Yes.
What do you think Mandela would say to the leaders of the world today?
I think Mandela would say, be selfless, really care for others. Don't put your interests, whatever economic interests, selfish interests, before the needs of others. I actually think that's what Mandela would say. Put the needs of others, especially the most vulnerable, and can you please stop and actually put their needs before your needs?
What do you think he would say to our children and our next generation?
I think he will say, don't give up.
Don't give
There's
up.
always the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Just keep doing the right thing.
A couple of fun facts, Faith. Just tell me, that early experience on an airplane coming to America when you were to the United States when you were 19 years old, what was the most daunting part of that journey? What was toughest for you?
I think the toughest for me was when we were taking off, and then obviously up on the glass. I think the first few hours, and I was shaking the whole time. It was actually quite sad.
Really?
I was also, and I realized that I actually I fear heights. That was the first time that I realized that.
Yeah.
So it was not pleasant. Yeah, it was a bit of a rough ride internally.
Are you still afraid of flying?
No, I'm not. I learned to overcome that fear. Yeah.
You did.
I did. I was so deliberate. Just that I have to overcome it.
You're married to a wonderful man called Reggie. What is the one thing you think Reggie would say he loves most about you?
I think he will say he loves my independence and straight talking.
Yes.
Yeah, what you see is what you get. I think he would say,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah. He was obviously raised by some parents who also appreciated strong, independent women, Faith.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, his mother was,
His mother was. Okay.
Mm.
And the third thing I'm curious about, what has been the most joyful part of being a mother?
I think for me, I think it's just the joyful part. It's just like, having like to watch them grow and become their own beings and their own selves, That for me has really been so joyful.
And just share very briefly who your children are and where they are in the world.
Okay, so my first one is Masandi. She lives in Cape Town, South Africa. My second one's name is Zanukuhle. She is in New York. And my third son, his name is Ntsika. He is in Massachusetts. And then my last one, his name is Sinentlantla. He still lives with us here in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Yeah, gosh, you've got a tough combination in terms of balancing all these balls,
Yes, yeah.
I know you're a very hands-on, committed parent as well. In closing, just any final thoughts, Faith, around leadership, in terms of leadership generally, and what we need to do today in the world, and also any final thoughts around what you think, Mandela would say to our generation and the next?
In terms of leadership, I really believe that as leaders, we need to understand that our role is to allow others' greatness to shine, So which basically then means that, as leaders, we have to be really obsessed about investing in our people, supporting our people, and helping them realize, their true potential, and greatness. I really think that for me, it's sort of like one of the key roles of leaders. And I think the second one, and it's really just about understanding that we are responsible for others. We are responsible for our communities. We are responsible for, society at large, and I mean, these days they call it stakeholder, capitalism. But for me, leadership is really about remembering that, you've got these multiple stakeholders that are impacted by your actions, either positive or negative. So I think that's an important one. And I think also in that same thread of, stakeholders, I think we really have to also embrace the global community. We need to embrace other people. And I think the other thing, Anne, is this issue of sustainability, ESG, it's big now. And leaders must actually embrace that,
Environmental, social, and governance.
And yes, environmental, social, and governance, because that is the only way, in my view, maybe not the only, but that is one of the key ways that we can really, have a different future. If we really care about the environment, care about, society, and are really very committed to the governance principles, we can really create a world that is going to be different, for the future generations.
Well, Faith, on that note, that very uplifting note, thank you for being the wonderful woman that you are. You truly are a woman of faith. And Ngiyabonga kakhulu, my friend, to my fellow friend from KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you for sharing your insights, and thank you for your work in the world.
Thank you for the opportunity, Anne. I really appreciate the time with you, and all the best with your project.
Thank you. Our conversation with Faith Khanyile today around diversity, equity, and inclusion begs the question, what is DEI? It's a conceptual framework designed to promote and implement full and fair participation of all people, including those historically underrepresented, unfairly treated, or historically disadvantaged. It is underpinned by core human values of equity, of inclusion, and dignity, where we acknowledge the inherent value and worth of each and every human being. Lessons from faith help us better understand the South African context, large corporations driving change and transformation. We better understand the conceptual framework, the different aspects that we need to focus on in driving and implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion. But in order to beat the odds and create sustainable competitive advantage, the missing magical ingredient lies in a conversation I had with Faith several years ago. For DEI to work, we need to move beyond ticking the boxes. We need to move beyond developing and implementing the conceptual framework. What we need to do is to create a new culture and give people, all people, a strong sense of belonging, of feeling safe, supported, accepted, and included. I recently watched a much cherished sports movie drama, a real life drama, which features the Academy Award-winning actress Sandra Bullock, and it's called The Blind Game. It's the real life story of Michael Orr, a talented Black kid who was born and raised in the poverty-stricken streets and neighborhood in the conservative, non-liberal city of Memphis in Tennessee in the United States of America. Michael gained admission to a top Christian school because of his ball game talent, but he was always the outsider, and then life intervened. He was taken in and later adopted by the Tuhi family, a white, wealthy, conservative Christian family with strong moral courage. And he was mentored by the matriarch, the fearless matriarch of the family, Leanne Tuhi. Despite the movie's critics and concerns around racial stereotyping, their misjudgment of his lack of quality education and perceiving that as a lack of intelligence, and the way they depicted adoption, the real power of the story reveals to us the missing magical ingredient in DEI, and that is giving people a strong sense of belonging, all people, the advantaged and disadvantaged alike. When Michael came into this family, yes, there was the extra skills development, but most importantly, what he experienced was loving human kindness, was bold moral courage. They had his back, and was a strong sense of family belonging. You're one of us. You're part of the inner circle. You too are protected and can feel safe, supported, accepted, and included. Michael went on to beat the odds. He upskilled his low grades and ultimately graduated at the University of Mississippi, or Ole Miss, as they call it. He became the star performer in the school football team, and he received multiple college offers to play for multiple colleges and their football teams around the country. He also went on to play in the NFL, the National Football League. The real confirmation and revelation was affirmed by the real Michael Orr, who published his own book, his biography called I Beat the Odds. And he said, "These are my family. Without them, I would not be here." So you too can help individuals beat the odds. You too can develop and implement DEI transformation strategies and plans in a way that creates sustainable competitive advantage. How? By giving people, all people, a strong sense of belonging. So until next time, remember that leading boldly is about making thoughtful, clear choices. And bold leadership is about taking bold action, just one small step at a time. One small step for you, but together, a giant step for humanity. So come back soon and share with your friends. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too. Take care and take thoughtful, bold action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leading Boldly into the Future. Please find links and connections mentioned in this show in our blog and never miss an episode by subscribing at anne-pratt.com. That's ANNE-PRATT.com. May these insights from inspiring industry leaders, remarkable disruptors, and courageous champions of change bring forth a brand new you, emboldened, empowered, and ready to inspire hope. Come back soon, share with your friends, sign up on anne-pratt.com and join our movement for change. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too.